Is outbound sales really possible in a post-pandemic world? My guest today says yes, and he's here to prove it to us on this episode of Closing Time. Thanks for tuning into Closing Time, the show for go-to-market leaders. I'm Val Riley, head of marketing for Unbounce, Insightly CRM, and LeadsRx. Today, I am joined by Marcus Chan. He is CEO and founder of Venly, a sales consultancy. Marcus, welcome to the show.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So as a market leader, I always want to hear that my sales team is doing outbound. I think it makes them appreciate inbound leads, but I also feel like it helps them become more well-rounded as a sales professional. What benefits do you see when salespeople do outbound?
Now, I'm a firm believer, if you know how to do outbound in any market, you'll never go hungry. And I'll give you a really, really simple example. So I remember this is years ago. I remember I was brand new to sales. I was struggling. I didn't have a great territory. And there's a guy, Tim, on my team who got a lot of inbound leads. And this is right before the recession hit in 2007. And I never got any inbound leads, but he got tons and he closed them. He ran circles around me and he kind of bragged about that. Now, I just kind of figured how to do outbound, how to start having success. As his leads dried up, I continued to have success. And while everyone else was closing maybe one and a half deals a month at max, I was closing 8 to 10 deals each month consistently, not because I was any better at closing, because I was better at generating pipeline consistently, even when no one else could. So it's a key skill to develop in today's time. So you're not entirely relying on just pure inbound leads.
There was definitely a moment in 2022 when it seemed like the pandemic killed outbound for good. There were no more office numbers to try. You couldn't surf that switchboard and see if you can get to a person directly. Connect rates plummeted. What was your take during that time?
So that was for sure a legitimate thing that's happening across the market. So obviously people were working from home, from leaders all the way down. There were not as many direct dials. And I would say right after it started to happen where it's hard to get hold of people, it's true. Connect rates definitely, they shot down. And I'll say even to this day, they still have not recovered for sure. That's just the reality. But the reality is if it has gone down, which it has for sure, what has even more critical is actually multi-threading and hitting on multiple channels. So it's not just easy as just calling one channel or emailing only. You need to hit on multiple channels to actually get a hold of your prospects. And that's going to help drive up, obviously, your actual connect rate to actually book a meeting. On top of that, multi-threading through the organization, that's absolutely critical as well. But what I'm going to say, though, on top of that is, if you want to be really great at booking a lot of pipeline, you have to be really great when you have that conversation as well. And I see a lot of times today, people complain about connect rates, but when they do connect, they have a really low conversion rate on that call because they're not ready for that conversation. They didn't properly research, and if they almost fumble the opportunity. And when you think about this, let's just say if 100 calls and they have what's called a 5% connect rate, so they have 5 conversations out of 100, if they only have a 20% conversion on that call, they're actually doing themselves a disservice because now they've talked to 5, they're only booking 1. So we can't always control the connect rate, but we can focus on multi-threading and working multiple channels to increase a little bit. But more importantly, when you're able to have a live conversation, how effective are you as a professional to actually convert that person into an actual book meeting?
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because from what I'm hearing, you're saying I'm a sales rep. I have to make 100, I have to be prepared for 100 conversations, and I'm probably going to only have 5. So how can you be prepared for those 5 and prepare for all 100, not knowing which 5 you're actually going to connect?
Yeah, great question. So I think what breaks down to is, first off, you should be segmenting your list very clearly. Now, in the perfect world, I would say if you're a sales leader of an organization, make it easier for your reps. Segment out the accounts, tier 1s, 2, and 3s, right? So the tier 1s are going to be the people who have the highest likelihood to actually convert. So, they might be buying triggers. They fall within your ideal customer profile. There are certain size and they have certain criteria that fit within it, right? That you're reaching out to. So it's a very similar messaging across the board. So when you reach out to them, whether you're not doing a lot of research, but at least you're talking about the same problems, it allows you to have the same type of conversation across the board. Now, in order to prepare, and again, it depends on what type of role you're in. Like if you're an account executive, realistically, you're probably not going to be making 100 calls per day. That's just probably not going to be realistic given the other responsibilities you have to do in your role. But let's just say, for example, you're going to be making, let's call it 20 calls per day. Well, properly researching and looking in advance using a lot of tools like AI can help prepare you so when you're actually live on the call, you can have an insightful conversation. And at the end of the day, you should know the ins and outs of that prospect's pains and frustrations and issues before they even answer the call. So when they do answer, you're ready to go. The other piece is do you know your talk track well enough? And I find a lot of salespeople do not. So when that prospect answers, every call they have starts differently. They say different things, they're inconsistent, and they're almost fumbling, hoping for their talent is going to help them answer and have a great conversation. Instead, have frameworks you follow that allow you to take conversations down the same path every single time. And then you lean on some of that research as well to have a better conversation.
I do love that AI tip. I actually went to AI and said, I am pitching Val Riley. What are some things I should know about her? And I got to see how accurate the AI was. And it was pretty darn good, actually. So that's a super good tip for salespeople who are,
100%.
Trying to do a ton of research and don't want it to consume all of their time.
Right. Exactly right. Now, I would recommend you batch your research, right? So let's call a 2-hour block on a Friday, and you're researching your whole list to get ready for the next week. So this way, you're not making a call and then researching. You're just going to dial down the list and be consistent executing the outbound you want to do.
Nice. I love that. So we've talked a little bit about things that reps can do, but I'd like to flip it and talk a little bit about leadership. How should organizational leadership be set up to really make outbound successful?
So first off, this is a transformation across the board and involves all parties, and there is change leadership as part of it. Now, years ago, I used to run I ran a full outbound org. We had pretty much zero marketing leads, and we generated typically 4 to 6x pipeline coverage every single week. Now, I had a pretty big org, so that was over 70 million in net new business logo pipeline every single week. But it wasn't by accident. It was very, very intentional. And it rolled through my whole entire organization from the very top down to the individual. So it's about creating that culture. Now, let's get really tactical here because it can't just be about fluffy, like make it a culture. It has to be internalized. So the first thing we did before we wrote anything out was we ran this realistic sales map. So we knew if we looked at the low performers, what would they need to generate in terms of number of meetings based on their ACV and their win rate, okay? And use it as a benchmark and to teach the org the why behind the math. So this way, we had a very clear number that we need to set X amount of meetings per person as an org. And we didn't base off the best rep or the average, we based off the worst rep. Very intentional, because obviously, if you have a better rep who has a higher win rate, higher ACV, they're going to actually crush their numbers, and also they don't have to generate as many meetings. So that's like the first step. Just run the math so the math makes sense and you know how to explain the math. But more importantly, explain the math how it benefits them personally. So for instance, I'll bring a new hire on. I would uncover what's most important for them. They would tell me things like they wanted to make X amount of dollars a year. They wanted to earn $500,000 a year. They wanted to retire their spouse. They wanted to hit President's Club, whatever they told me. And I would show them the math of how to work backwards, how many meetings they need to generate every single week. So I link that directly together. So it wasn't say, hey, here's how you hit your quota. I'm like, here's how you buy your dream house. Here's how you retire your spouse. And we established it by running that math. That's number one. So once we have the math, that sounds great. But what do you have to do every single week? We then also set really clear prospecting times. The entire org is prospecting. Okay. That's either every day or every single week. So for instance, we did Mondays and Wednesdays from 8 to 12 p.m. That was set. We did as an org, right? Other regions, some of them did maybe every single day for 2 hours. Either way, you choose a really set structure, okay? And then that structure has to work together. So for my in-person teams, they would do it in person. For my remote teams, they would hop onto Zoom or Microsoft Teams. Everyone's on mute, and they're calling during that time. And there's a set cadence of that time. So for instance, the way we did it was 50 minutes on, 10-minute break. So 50 minutes, everyone's making calls, everyone's dialing, and that's the only, they're not researching, they're not writing emails, they're making calls. And then there's a 10-minute break at the break, and they take the break, and everyone goes off mute, and they share their actual results of what they accomplished in that last hour. How many calls they make, how many meetings they book, and who they booked with. And then people get to share wins together. So there's high accountability as part of it. Now, here's what's really key. The leader is also in there too. So the leader themselves is listening in, they're coaching, they're making their own calls, they're leading from the front. So this is not an armchair quarterback situation. You're leading from the front as a leader. So this is where it's really critical to have this type of thing in place, all right? Now, on top of that, you want to incorporate also a public accountability system. So if it's virtual, that means then you pull up a tracker. Everyone's putting in their numbers for how many calls, how many meetings they book. So it's clear accountability across the board, and you're driving success. If you're in person, you can do it on a whiteboard, same thing. And you just rinse and repeat that. Now, what this does mean as well is in order to run this highly effectively, you want to onboard effectively, train effectively on these core skills of how do you actually prospect on the phones or write emails and that type of stuff. And when you do it consistently, it becomes like clockwork. And I remember just taking over teams like this that would not do this before. They started doing this, and it's amazing how quickly your results are turning around because you're helping guide the reps on how to be successful. And of course, if they have low conversions, then you can coach accordingly on the key skills to actually get better at handling objections, multi-threading, or whatever else you need to do to book more meetings.
My question was about leadership, but what I really heard from you is that there's just a camaraderie of everybody really working together, shoulder to shoulder with the leaders when you do those sort of times where everybody is prospecting together. And that's got to really help the reps feel like, the rejection and the discomfort of outbound, it kind of soothes it when you have that whole team working on it at the same time.
You're 100% right. So what happens is when everyone feels like they're aligned in a mission, they're doing it together, they feel less lonely. Versus when they're on their own, when they're making calls in their own place and getting beat up, getting their face kicked in, they're like, oh, my job is hard. I have a bad territory. I have bad prospects. But when they see everyone else is doing as well, doing their best, getting hit with objections, it is wildly powerful. And that's why it's really key as a leader to also show your team that you can help them too. So leadership is not about a top-down approach of you must do this. It starts from really, setting the vision, doing the math, creating the systems around it, but then on top of that, being in trenches with them. Because it's amazing how fast you can turn results around if you actually get in front of the actual source of what they're actually doing to see what they're actually doing. And what's amazing when you do see that, you see a lot of times they just need a little bit of coaching and guidance to actually get better results. And that's really it. Nothing crazy.
So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit more. Do you think that organizations should have teams that are strictly outbound and teams that are strictly inbound? Or do you feel like it's better when sales professionals do both?
So really great question. I think I'm biased because I grew up as a full cycle seller. I've only ran full cycle teams where we never had SDRs. We never had BDRs. We did everything cold to sold, and we handed it on from there. So I think I'm a little biased, but I believe everyone should have outbound as part of the responsibility, right? Especially for AEs, because when you own the outbound piece, you're owning your future. You're saying, okay, you know what? Regardless of whatever SDR leads are often getting brought in, I'm also going to control and focus on my territory as well. Now, the cool part is like if you're an organization that has SDRs and you have AEs who can do outbound as well, then you can also divide and conquer. So, for instance, you can have your AEs then work your tier one accounts. The biggest opportunities, the best growth signals, the ones with the biggest amounts of growth, and they can work on those ones specifically, a smaller portfolio of those accounts. And then you get the SDRs work the other accounts as well, which are still worth closing and working the deal, but maybe they don't need the level of sophistication that may require of a more complex account. So I'm a firm believer that's a key way to do it, because on top of that, then you also don't absolve the AE of saying, well, I'm not performing because of the leads, because of my SDR or whatever it's going to be. They have more ownership in their actual results.
I love it. How about SDRs working marketing generated leads versus AEs working marketing generated leads? Do you have an opinion there? Is it like tiers of leads that should be handled by different sales roles, or is there some other system that you feel like works?
Yeah, great question. Generally speaking, I have no problem with any of them working marketing leads. I don't think it should be like, only you get marketing leads. However, as you and I both know, not every marketing lead is a sales qualified lead. Like not every MQL is SQL. That's just the reality, right? Like if I had control in the organization, I would want to, if they were considered like tier one accounts, right? These are ones that they fit within a certain a profile of maybe a certain size, maybe revenue size or opportunity size or growth size, and they're most likely. Plus, you also have specific growth signals. Those ones should go, in my opinion, should go right to the AE. The AE should be working those specifically because generally speaking, it's very rare to find SDRs who have been in a role for let's call it 10 years and they have a wealth of like business acumen experience. So for some of those highly enriched leads are more likely to qualify, or they may need more work because maybe it's a C-level executive and something complex. They should have a more skilled professional having a conversation because ultimately, I'm a firm believer, whoever is the most skilled is the one should have a conversation because that's going to increase the likelihood to actually turn into a real opportunity to actually convert to close.
I have really enjoyed our conversation, Marcus. And I've been in B2B SaaS for a very long time, and I don't want to say how many years, but in every organization I've been involved in as a marketing leader, I've only had across the years maybe less than 5% of opportunities being generated by outbound. So hearing you talk so enthusiastically about outbound gives me a little bit of hope. I really feel like there's a lot of organizations out there who are 100% inbound or 90+% inbound. What would you say to those organizations? Are they just leaving stuff on the table?
Well, 100%. When you are waiting for just purely inbound, you are saying, hey, I'm just going to depend on the market to control my results, right? And I think the best way to kind of think about this is if we can look at other industries outside of SaaS that have been running for 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 plus years that have grown through purely outbound channels that are B2B, what have they done? What are they doing? So I'll give you a really simple example, right? So a good example is a company, Waste Management. Waste Management is an $81 billion, I think it's $81 billion, huge company is what it breaks down to. And they specifically are primarily outbound organization. So they've been around, they've gone through many, many recessions, right? And they sell something that's not sexy at all, waste management services businesses, right? And they're primarily outbound field sales force. So meaning they have people that are out in the field, meeting with prospects in person. They're also doing virtual as well. They're doing outbound calls too. They're doing literally all of the above. The question you want to ask yourself as a sales leader is, that's interesting. They grew to this massive size and they're publicly traded. If our SaaS company wants to get to that level, what lessons can we learn from there about their sales force? You can also borrow some of the cool parts of like the technology piece of SaaS that these companies are not as savvy with. But if we can incorporate some of the SaaS technology, some of the outreach tools, and we combine it with how they train their sales force, how they structure their sales, how they structure the organization, combine it together, it opens up whole new doors as well. And ultimately, when you think about this, when you have a repeatable motion that is outbound base, generally speaking, it can actually increase your enterprise value as well. Because now it's a repeatable process across the board that's not purely dependent on, say, ads or something like that or marketing content. But if you can do both, if you can have incredible marketing and you can have incredible outbound, you combine it together, it's like one of the most beautiful things you can see. Like, I'll give you an example, even from my own small business, right? Like, once I complete control my marketing and I could create inbound leads and do outbound, my business exploded in a great way. Because I never had the opportunity to have an inbound leads at the same level because I never had the control in the marketing piece. But once I could control both, it was like shooting like fish in a barrel, So if you can do both, it gives you better control on your future, better control on the pipeline. But on top of that, your org will have more fun. They'll have far more fun when the reps actually know they can control their future versus saying, hey, the marketing's not good, the leads aren't good. But if you can give them really good leads and also give them proper training, support them, give them the systems to win, you're going to see better results, lower turnover, and that's going to be better for your company across the board.
This is music to my ears. I can't count the number of sleepless nights I've had as a marketing leader when the business is 100% outbound. It just feels like I carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. And it's really inspiring to hear sales leaders and people in the sales field like you say, hey, outbound is still there and we can still do it and we can be successful. And according to you, make it even more fun. So yeah, definitely inspiring.
Absolutely.
Where can folks go if they want to learn more about you and your coaching services?
100%. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Look at Marcus Shams, very easy. I'm also on YouTube, or you can go to bentleyconsulting.com.
Nice. I definitely recommend Marcus as a follow on LinkedIn for anyone out there. So please check him out. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Closing Time. Remember, you can get this show delivered right to your inbox. Just click the link in the show notes, and we will see you next week.